Hello there, welcome to the Football Bloc, and today I'm going to give you a preview of all the big teams heading into the 2022 World Cup. We're going to look back some of their most recent results for international friendlies and the Nations League, and I'm going to analyze these games and kind of try and predict what is going to come about these teams heading into the World Cup. If that sounds interesting, then let's hop right into it. So in my opinion, I think that one of the biggest indicators for how a particular team is going to do at the World Cup is if you look at the friendlies or matches that they had right before the World Cup that they use as World Cup preparation games. So we're going to look ahead to a lot of the games in the Nations League and a lot of these international friendlies. We're going to look at how each of the big teams performed and then try to use that as an indicator to how well they're going to do at the 2022 World Cup. Now, there is a caveat to this for obvious reasons. This World Cup is very different than any of the others that we've seen before. And, you know, even though these are warm-up games right before the World Cup, there's still about a month in between. It's not like previous World Cups where, you know, you'd have a warm-up game and then like a week or 2 weeks before the World Cup starts. So these aren't going to be as accurate. And another detail is when I say big teams, I'm going to look at 10 countries, meaning 7 countries from Europe and 3 from South America. Now, the 3 from South America will be Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and the other 7 nations from Europe will be Spain, Portugal, England, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, France. Now, obviously, there are a lot of other big teams out there that are very important. Obviously, you know, Denmark and Croatia are playing very well. I mean, you can also look at a team like Senegal from Africa, or who knows, maybe like US or Mexico. But, you know, just for the sake of the video, I had to narrow it down to just 10 countries, the big teams, I guess you can say. So without further ado, let's look into each of these teams. So first, we're going to look at the European teams, and then I'm going to try and go in geographic order, so from west to east. Then we're going to look at the South American teams. So first off, we're going to look at Spain. Now, Spain had 2 games, as you can see here on my screen. We have a game against Switzerland, and they had a game against Portugal. Now, they do have another warm-up game for the World Cup against Jordan, but obviously Jordan is a much weaker opponent, so I'm not sure how much we can take out of that match in particular. The first game against Switzerland in the Nations League, I thought that Spain overall didn't necessarily play that bad, but they didn't really look that convincing, and Switzerland didn't really try to dominate the game. It was, you know, typical Spanish performance where they really held on to the ball, they held on to the possession, but Spain really faltered on set pieces. But Switzerland were dangerous on the corners, and that's how they were able to win. And it is very concerning when you look at the back line for Spain. You know, there was some questions there. I mean, Unai Simon, I've criticized in the past. He was actually not that bad across these 2 games, but the center back pairing was very lacking. Eric Garcia in particular, I thought had not a very good game at all, and I don't understand why he is continuously chosen by Lucho Enrique. Meanwhile, Sergio Ramos has been left out of the squad, even though he has been in great form for PSG. You know, there's some other questions here and there. Center forward, for example. I mean, Morata basically has the spot nailed on, but I just feel like he doesn't necessarily fit with the team sometimes, and not to mention, Morata is Morata. Like, you know, he'll score, but he'll also be, you know, super wasteful with chances, to say the least. Now, people have criticized Lucho Enrique for leaving home Iago Aspas. He's also tried several other center forwards. Borja Iglesias is one. And, you know, none of them just really seem to work, but at the same time, you can say he really hasn't given much of them a chance. In my opinion, I think that Iago Aspas would fit well into the team. Maybe as an impact sub, but he still should be in the squad. The guy is a talented player. But on to the next game against Portugal, and Spain ended up winning this game 1-0. But it was very interesting because I thought Portugal actually were the better team, and we'll get more onto Portugal in a bit. But you know, Portugal themselves were very wasteful, and Spain looked very, very weak, especially on the wings, which is another area of concern. Yet they just waited and got the chance at the very end of the game. Nice goal from Morata, also very nice assist, and nice appearance from Nico Williams. But overall, Spain doesn't really look that convincing going into the World Cup, I have to admit. But, you know, there is a slight variable to that in that this Spanish team could end up being very, very different. Looks like Luis Enrique is open to experimentation. So who knows, the team that we could end up seeing in Qatar could be completely different than what we saw here. So now let's look on to Portugal, and similar case here where they have one more match against Nigeria. Now Nigeria are a very serious team, so this could give a much better indicator heading into the World Cup. Now between their two matches here, the first game was against Czech Republic. Now, as good as the Czech Republic were at the Euros, I feel like this team has declined in many ways, not to mention the Nations League in some sense can be a hit or miss. Like you have some teams like Hungary who just go all out, versus you have other teams that kind of just, they don't really care because the Nations League doesn't necessarily have the same prestige as other tournaments does. It's a brand new tournament. And as a result, Portugal kind of wiped the floor with Czech Republic. Now, I think that this scoreline is maybe slightly flattering to Portugal, as Czech Republic weren't that bad. But still, Portugal did perform well in this game. I have to admit that they performed well. Now, the biggest downside to this game is Ronaldo's performance. Now, obviously, Ronaldo is one of the greatest players of all time, but Father Time is catching up to him, and he could have had a hat trick in this game if he was in his prime. If you would expect that if it was Ronaldo from 2017 or 2015 or even as late as maybe 2020, he would have put away some of those chances. And instead, you know, he looked late, he looked a little slow, he just looked not confident in himself, which is very uncharacteristic of Ronaldo, and that could just be because of his club form. But, you know, expect him to, I guess, maybe not be at his best for the World Cup, but at the same time, this is Ronaldo, so who knows? He could just, this could just be a low point for him come the World Cup. He could absolutely just pop off, so who knows? Diogo Dalot actually had a really good game, surprisingly, even though he's playing as right back, scored 2 goals. On to this next game against Spain. Now, I already talked about this game briefly already. I thought Portugal actually played well. Midfield-wise, I thought they held onto the ball good. They were clinical in terms of, you know, passing in the midfield, but they were not clinical in front of goal. They created a lot of chances, but they didn't score any of them, and they just let Spain into the match by the end of it. And as good as the performance was in the previous game, this game against Spain kind of just says same old, same old. And that is the fact that Fernando Santos is not the right guy for this job. And I feel like a lot of this Portuguese talent is just being wasted away through this manager. And going into the World Cup, obviously, they're not going to sack their manager. They're not going to change the manager. And it's not really looking that good for Portugal. Now, I think they will make it out of their group, as I said before in previous videos, but I don't really expect much of this Portuguese team. Now let's look on to the next team. We have France, the reigning champions, France. And they had 2 matches here. They had a match against Austria and a match against Denmark in the Nations League. And I've talked extensively about France before, how I think that they were, you know, kind of an overrated world champion, and that, you know, they kind of benefited from all the other teams playing bad. Now, I think that France, even as maybe subpar as they were at the World Cup, which I know is a bold take, but even as subpar as they were, I feel like they've declined even more. Like we saw how kind of a mixed bag the performance was at the Euros, and then it seems to just be deteriorating more and more with each coming month. We had, you know, obviously there's lots of injuries. Jules Koundé, Paul Pogba, Benzema, of course, and there's a few other players as well. But still, France has, in my opinion, the most talented squad in the world. They have such a deep squad, a world-class player in pretty much every position. So injuries shouldn't be a problem, or as big as a problem as it seems to be. I think similar to Portugal, I think Deschamps necessarily isn't the right guy for the job. I think sometimes he benefits from just having such talented players at his disposal that his, I guess, tactical ineptitude kind of just goes under the radar, because, you know, when you have a guy like Mbappe that can just score 2-3 goals a match, you know, it doesn't really matter if you got some of your tactics wrong. But if you look at this match against Austria, I mean, France won convincingly, but Austria was the worst team in this Nations League group. Go on to the match against Denmark, a completely different story. I thought that Denmark were, you know, very solid at the back. They were just efficient with their chances, and they're just very clinical. And France just looked lethargic. France did not look like themselves. Yes, they had a few chances, and Schmeichel was forced into a few saves, some really important saves, but even still, I mean, Denmark was just easily the better team. Like, you just look at this match, and, you know, a 2-0 scoreline seems very fitting. Denmark 100% deserved the win. Denmark are looking very good heading into the World Cup for the most part. France, on the other hand, you also look at some of the internal rifts within the squad. I mean, there's a whole scandal with Pogba and how that relates to Mbappe, and other things here and there. And, you know, it looks like, you know, maybe the Champions curse will live on yet again for 2022. Now, obviously, I think France won't get eliminated in the group stage, because that'll just be way too uncanny for it to be, I think, 4 times in a row, something like that. That is just, that's too far-fetched. But that being said, I don't think France will necessarily have a good World Cup either. There's just, you know, too many things going on underneath the hood for the engine to function properly. All right, so now let's move on to Belgium. Now, Belgium, a lot of people may argue with me and say, oh, Belgium's not a big team. And to some extent, I actually would agree. I don't think Belgium are as good as a lot of people are saying they are. But still, you just look at the squad. It's filled with world-class players. And, you know, recent history, they got 3rd place at the last World Cup. They've gone relatively far in a lot of the past tournaments, so you have to put them up there. But on to that first point about Belgium not necessarily being among the big dogs, I think that this past few matches actually kind of speaks a lot to that argument. And I think Belgium, and I've been saying this for a long time, I think this Belgian team is overrated. And I think manager is also a serious problem. We see that with a lot of these teams. I think the manager is a very big problem. I think Roberto Martinez is not the right guy for the job. I think that Belgium wasted their golden generation on 2 subpar managers, Mark Wilmots and then now Roberto Martinez. And it's just, they lost their opportunity. I think Belgium, if they wanted to win a tournament, it probably was the 2018 World Cup. That's when all their players were in their prime. Everyone was, you know, playing well together. But now the team has severely declined. Obviously, you still have world-class guys like Lukaku and De Bruyne, but you look at other players. Eden Hazard is a shadow of himself. You look at the center backs in Toby Alderweireld, Jan Vertonghen. You know, they aren't playing at a top level anymore. They're also very, very old. But obviously, you still have Courtois at the back. So this is not a pushover. This is not a bad team. But I don't think this will be their chance to win the World Cup. If you look at their matches here, yes, they defeated Wales, but Wales has not really been playing that well as of late. And I thought Belgium just did just enough to win. Wasn't really that convincing of a performance. And then look to the next game against Netherlands, and they lost 1-0. And this game overall, I just thought was kind of a snooze fest, if I'm being honest. And it's very sad to see that, because you just look at this wealth of attacking talent that Belgium has, but they just didn't really utilize it. And the Netherlands were more clinical with their few chances that they had. And we'll talk more about the Netherlands in a moment, but Belgium looked very disappointing just overall. And I think heading into the 2022 World Cup, they'll need to rely on individual performances to go far. And that's not to say that they can't do that. I mean, you know, let's say Thibaut Courtois just has an amazing performance and just, you know, saves everything coming his way. Or De Bruyne just goes absolutely insane in a particular match. That could very well happen, and that could be the catalyst that sends Belgium to the knockout stage, or if they're already in the knockout stage, to the next round or something like that. But obviously, to win the World Cup, you need to have a team. And I don't think that Belgium's team mentality is as strong. I think they are severely lacking in a lot of departments, and I'm not really expecting much of Belgium, to be honest. So looking at these past few teams, it's been kind of, disappointing, or kind of, I don't want to say morbid, but, maybe like just kind of pessimistic. That's the word, pessimistic. So now let's spice it up and look at a team that's actually been playing pretty well, and we have the Netherlands here. And out of all these teams we've mentioned so far, I actually think Netherlands are looking pretty good. They're shaping up great for Qatar. They have 2 matches here. They beat Poland 2-0, and they beat Belgium 1-0, as we just talked about. Now, obviously, the Netherlands have a lot to prove. They missed Euro 2016, and they missed World Cup 2018. Very embarrassing for them, but things were looking on the upward scale. They were playing well in, I believe it was the 2019 iteration of the Nations League. They lost their manager, Ronald Koeman, who had them playing some beautiful football. Frank de Boer came in. Not the greatest manager, in my opinion, and they were, for the most part, disappointing at the Euros. But you could see that potential was there. And I think that heading into Qatar, they could seriously be a dark horse. And yes, I know I had them eliminated in my group stage in my other early prediction. But again, that, as I said before in that video, that was very early predictions. So the Netherlands could be a dark horse. And I almost don't want to say dark horse, because they've made it to 3 finals. They're one of the greatest, historically one of the greatest teams of all time. But not many people are really expecting much of them. And if you look at this game against Poland, Poland are a strong opponent, a decent opponent, and Netherlands just very convincingly won. But I think the match against Belgium here, you can get a lot out of that, in the sense that Belgium are one of the best teams in the world, or, according to the FIBA rankings, they're in the top 5. And the Netherlands, while Belgium did have chances, I thought the Netherlands was very much a better team. Like, there was a few times where Belgium had some chances and you were like, okay, they probably should have scored that. But for the most part, the Dutch just looked much better. They looked more fresh. They looked more eager. They looked more motivated. And the team just worked together as a unit far better than Belgium did. And while Netherlands might not have the same star power that the Belgians have, like, for example, they might not have a Lukaku or a De Bruyne or a Courtois, they still have a very well-rounded squad with a few stars here and there littered without. So, like I said, Netherlands going into 2022 are a team to watch out for. All right, so let's go on to the next team, and we have Germany. Now, if you look at Germany's last 2 games here, against Hungary and against England, there are some positives, but also some negatives. And this is really surprising, because Germany is always almost the consistent team. They're always very good, very strong, very reliable, and even if they aren't the best team in the world, they're always going to be there. And this German team has been wildly inconsistent, something that is very uncharacteristic of the German national team. And obviously, they have a new manager. Hansi Flick came in, and he's kind of switching things up. He's bringing in new guys. He's trying out some new players, things like that. So there obviously is going to be a growing period. But if I'm being honest, I would have thought that by this time, Germany kind of would have had themselves together, or at least more so than they do now. Because the first match against Hungary here, I thought that Germany, dominated possession. They had more chances, but Hungary deserved the win. I mean, it was a beautiful goal, a beautiful early goal to grab the lead through, I believe his name is Salai. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And like I said, Germany had the bulk of the possession, but Hungary just killed them on the counter. There was, I would say, 2 or 3 chances that Hungary probably should have scored. This could have been like 3-0, maybe 3-1 Hungary if some of those chances had gone differently. On the flip side, you look at their game here against England, and yes, they tied 3-3. It was a very, very exciting game to watch. For the most part, I thought England was actually the better team, and we'll talk more about England soon, but I thought that Germany were pretty abysmal in the first 25 minutes. England were pinging the ball around. They were playing well. They were really kind of letting their attacking players just show their grit, show their talent. Now, Germany was given a lifeline through Harry Maguire, of course, and then an individual brilliance from Kai Havertz saw them go 2-0 up, but they capitulated a little bit. England had the fire awaken within them. They got 2 back, and then they got a 3rd goal, and it looked way too easy. That's not something you usually say about Germany. Germany is almost always an extremely hard team to play against. They're always like a team that instills fear, but it didn't really seem like England was really that afraid of them. England was, you know, not really all that bothered to get those 3 goals back. Now, obviously Germany were able to get an equalizer, but it was relatively lucky through really bad goalkeeping error from Nick Pope. But still, a 3-3 result. In some ways, if you look at the way Germany was able to utilize the few chances they had and score 3 goals, that is a positive. That is good that you can be that clinical. But at the same time, their team just looks very disorganized at the back, and there's almost a lack of motivation, and to a certain extent, maybe even a lack of experience. I don't think that the team mentality is there. It doesn't seem like everything is kind of melded together. It doesn't seem like everyone is kind of under the vision or with the vision of Hansi Flick. So I'm not really sure what to expect of Germany come the World Cup. I mean, it could click and they could, you know, get all the way to the final, maybe win the whole thing. At the same time, they could really struggle in the opening stages and then get eliminated by a team that does have it together. So who knows? Now let's look on to the last European team, and we have England. Everyone's favorite team to hate, and I will say I'm not the biggest fan of England, but I try to be fair, I try to be unbiased. That being said, England were a team that, you know, when they did the World Cup draw, was probably my favorite to win the entire tournament. Yes, they don't play the best football, but they kind of operate like a tournament team where they just know how to get results. It might not be the prettiest thing to witness, but they have a very stingy defense, and you know, they just find a way to grab that important goal. At least that's how they were at the Euros. As of late, they have not been like that. Their Nations League performance as of late has been abysmal, and the results haven't really got that much better in these past 2 games here. They lined up against Italy in a game that obviously rematch of the Euro final, and most people would probably expect England to come out on top, given that, you know, Italy hasn't been in the best form as of late. They're kind of going through a transitionary period to a certain extent, but Italy came out and performed really, really well. It's such a shame that they're not going to the World Cup, yeah, but that's a whole other discussion. But Italy played very, very well. They outplayed England. Beautiful goal from, I believe it was Raspadori. But, you know, it was just kind of a very drab and dull performance from England. You look at this team and you're like, this crop of players could be playing so much better. A lot of questions can be asked about Gareth Southgate. A very continuous theme that we see through a lot of these European teams is just talented crop of players. Manager is not really the right guy for the job, and the FA is either, you know, doesn't have the guts to sack him, or it's too late to sack him when they should have done it months ago. But similar story happened against Germany. Now, I already talked about that game in the Germany section, but still, there's a lot of positives you can come out with this from this game. Obviously, Mason Mount, Saka, Harry Kane played great up top. In segments, there was moments of the game where the attack kind of just had the motivation and had the ambition, but didn't really click together. Then they did click together, but then there's also some big questions you can ask about the back line, guys who are being called up that probably shouldn't be called up, guys that are left out. Tomori, for example, who's been insane for Milan, but did not play, versus Maguire, who's been terrible for Manchester United. Everyone sees it, yet he still starts. So I expect England to kind of get their act together, at least in the defensive department for the World Cup. But there still could be some lingering issues, and England are not my tournament favorites anymore. Now, I still think they'll probably top the group, and they'll probably make a deep run, but they are not as initially strong as I thought. Now, let's go on across the Atlantic Ocean look at South America, and our first big South American team is Uruguay. Now, I know a lot of you guys might say, Uruguay's not a big team. Uruguay has won 2 World Cups, and yes, they may not be as consistent. They may not be blessed with a massive wealth of world-class talent. They are always a strong team, and I think that they are deserving of a spot among, I guess, the Big Ten, if you want to use that word, just simply because of their history. Looking at these 2 matches here, and these results are wildly different. First, you have a loss to Iran, but then you have a win over Canada. Now, obviously, these are friendlies. They're not nations leagues like the European teams. But I think just looking at these results don't tell the full story. You have to look at the performances in each of these matches. There was some experimentations with different players, maybe even some formation changes throughout these matches, or like mid-match, things like that. The match against Iran, I thought that Iran looked pretty strong, actually, if I'm being perfectly honest. This was more so about Iran just being very, very resolute in defense. That being said, Uruguay should have had, I would say maybe 2 goals. There was 2 chances in that game. Vecino had a chance that he really, really should have put away. And then Suarez had a few shots that, were either saved or were this close from going in. So it wasn't necessarily a bad performance from Uruguay, even though they ended up losing. It was more so just, I thought Iran, everything just went their way on that particular day. And, credit to them. They did play well, but it's not like panic mode for Uruguay. Especially when you look at their next game against Canada, where I thought Uruguay, it was a very classy performance. They just came there, they, were respectful to their opponents, but at the same time, it was very clear that Uruguay were much better than Canada. And it's not that Canada played bad. They didn't get destroyed or anything like that. Canada actually had some chances, but Uruguay just were much more intelligent, much more experience, and that's expected when you look at a team like this going up against like Canada. So heading into the World Cup, there are some issues of depth, of course. I mean, Uruguay just in general is a really tiny country, so they're not going to be littered with world-class talent. But if you look at maybe their center back pairing, that could potentially be an issue. I mean, Diego Godin is still playing, and the guy is in his late 30s. Also, Suarez, who I thought against Iran didn't look that bad. Now, he's still not the Suarez of old. He's playing in Uruguay with Nacional. This will probably be his last hurrah with the Uruguay national team. But he is, visibly old. He still has talent. He's still there. He obviously should be a part of the squad, but it's not the same Suarez that we saw in 2018, 2014, or 2010. But on the flip side, you have young and upcoming players. Darwin Núñez, I think, could be very, very important for Uruguay in this World Cup. And Fede Valverde, who, in my opinion, is one of the best players in the world at the moment. He is playing like off the charts for Real Madrid. And I think if he replicates some of that performance at the World Cup, he could really, really propel Uruguay to the next level. And because of that, I don't think Uruguay are going to win the World Cup or anything like that, but I will say they are a team to watch out for at the World Cup if everything goes their way. All right, so now let's move on to another South American team, and we have Argentina. Now, when you're looking at all the other European teams, a lot of them struggled, a lot of them were a little disappointing. Very different story here with Argentina and Brazil, which we will look in just a moment. Honduras and Jamaica were Argentina's 2 opponents, and they both lost 3-0. Argentina had incredibly convincing wins over both of these teams. For the most part, it was kind of an identical performance, in my opinion, in both of these matches, in that Argentina showed up. They weren't really bothered, and they just swept aside the opposition. Messi has been playing some of the best football you've ever seen Messi play in an Argentinian shirt. And he isn't the only guy, though. He's not carrying this team. And obviously, he's a very important cog to this team, but almost in every other position, you have guys playing to their standards or above what you think that they should be playing. I mean, Di Maria is still around. Rodrigo de Paul, even though he's not doing the best for his club side, Atletico Madrid is playing great for Argentina. Paredes is very important a piece of the midfield. Lo Celso. You look at the defense as well. Romero, Tagliafico, Emi Martinez. Of course, like this team, just everything about it, it works. Everything about it it seems right. This team is playing great football. They're fun to watch. The players look like they're having fun as they're playing. Now, the one thing I would say is if you look at these two opponents, it's Honduras and Jamaica. Not necessarily the strongest opponent. I mean, compare that to England. England played Italy and Germany, two of the greatest teams of all time. Honduras and Jamaica come nowhere near that. So, yes, Argentina has had these two beautiful performances, but the opposition is, not as strong. But in Argentina's case, you just look at the results over the past year. I mean, they went up against big teams and defeated them and played well. If anything, Argentina has gotten better with each game. I mean, the manager, Lionel Scaloni, it's so funny. You look at all these European managers and it almost seems that they don't fit. Scaloni fits perfectly for Argentina. He came in at a crazy period, the fallout after the 2018 World Cup. And, it took him a while to kind of calm down the situation. But since then, he hasn't looked back. I mean, this Argentinian team is the best Argentinian team that, I've ever seen as a football fan. Now, yes, I'm a little younger, but still, this team is seriously, seriously good. And, in my other prediction video, I said that Argentina is my favorite to win the World Cup. And they definitely are up there, but they no longer are my, without a doubt, clear number one. I would say there's a tie for number one, and that is the next team that we will look at, the final team we will look at. Now, as I just mentioned, the final team we will look at is Brazil. And, Brazil is Brazil. They're always going to be playing good. They're always going to be favorites for the World Cup. But this team looks seriously, seriously good. I mean, you just look at these two results. 3-0 win over Ghana, 5-1 win over Tunisia. Brazil did not look flustered. They did not look at any point with their backs against the wall. It was a professional and classy performance. Both of these matches, players all over the pitch playing well, team working together. It looks like Chiche just found the right players, the right system, and he's sticking to it. Now, obviously, the criticism that I had of Argentina, or maybe not criticism, but I guess grain of salt, is that their teams that they went up against were just not that great oppositions. Now, obviously, Ghana and Tunisia are not the best teams in the world. They aren't like, Europe's elite or anything like that, but they still, both of them are World Cup teams. I mean, Ghana and Tunisia are both going to the World Cup in a few months, and they look completely out of their depth here against Brazil. In every area of the pitch, Brazil looks secure, whether it be Alisson in goal or Thiago Silva at the center of defense, or, Paquetá in the midfield, and of course, Neymar up top, the wings, Rafinha and Vinicius Jr. Everything just seems to fit in a puzzle piece perfectly. I will say, set pieces, Brazil do look a little shaky, but beyond that, I mean, you really, that was the one weakness I could find. And it was really, there really is no other weakness in this team. I mean, possibly fullbacks, but even still, yes, the names of their fullbacks don't really pop out on the paper, but in these two games, they played fine. They didn't really have any issues. One other thing, too, is if you look at Tunisia, who scored, they were able to score a goal against Brazil off a set piece. Immediately after conceding that goal, Brazil went, full throttle on the other end and then regained the lead. The game was tied 1-1, and then they immediately scored to make it 2-1, and to regain to put the match back in their hands. And then in both of these games, I mean, Richarlison has had very statement performances, basically solidifying his spot in the starting 11, I would say. I mean, Rafinha played great. Vinicius Jr., who, he's in great form for his club, but he was able to translate that. to the Brazilian national team. Same with Neymar. Even Pedro, who came from Flamengo, came and scored a really nice goal. So everything is looking good for Brazil heading into Qatar. And as I just said, they are tied with Argentina for being my favorite for the whole tournament. And if you ask me to choose between them, I'm not going to do that, because both these teams are just so amazing right now. Both of these teams, all these guys are playing great for their club, playing great for their country. I think a tournament like this, which is just going to be right in the middle of the winter match form with your club, is going to be really important. Both of these teams have that, with players playing great for their clubs. So yeah, like I said, Brazil and Argentina are tied for my favorites for the 2022 World Cup. So anyway, guys, that has been it for my previews for the 10 biggest teams heading into the 2022 World Cup. Let me know what you think. It looks like most of the big European teams look kind of disappointing. It looks like we might have a tournament where most of the big European teams at least flop. On the other side, you have the South American teams, the two biggest South American teams at least, just playing off the charts. Obviously, these are all based on recent results. Playing off the charts. And then the kind of mid to upper tier teams in Europe looking like they're going to be a much stronger opposition or opponent. I mean, look at a team like Denmark, or a team like Poland, or a team like Croatia. Like, those teams look to be in much better form than the big guys from Europe, which is very, very interesting. But, you know, this World Cup has the potential to just be a very weird World Cup, a very strange World Cup. I mean, it already is going against the grain by being in winter, and it's the first World Cup in an Arab country. There's going to be a lot of things about it. I mean, the country of Qatar itself is super small. There isn't a lot of travel between the cities or anything like that, because of the condensed schedule. The games there's going to be 4 games in a day. So this World Cup is already reaching unprecedented territory, and I'm interested to see if that will translate to the football on the pitch. And there's a great possibility that it might, and it could be shaping up to just a very weird World Cup, very strange World Cup. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you think that this World Cup is going to be strange, and if you do, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think a completely random team is going to win it or something like that? Let me know what you think of my assessment of each team. Do you think I'm overrating Argentina and Brazil? Do you think I'm underrating any of these big European teams? Do you think this whole concept of this video can be thrown out the window because the World Cup still is like a month away, and I'm reading too much into it or anything like that? Just type in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this video with a friend. Anyway, guys, my name is Brandon. This has been the Football Bloc. Hope you guys have a nice rest of your night.